Imagine this, a seasoned engineer, a veteran from the Dutch semiconductor giant ASML, walks into a high-security lab in Shenzhen. He's been lured there by a signing bonus worth nearly $1 million and, the promise of a project that could change everything. But as he gets to the security desk, things get weird. They hand him an official ID card, but the name on it isn't his. It's a pseudonym. And as he walks into the lab, he starts seeing faces he knows. Former colleagues, people he used to grab coffee with back in the Netherlands. But here, they're all ghosts. They're working under fake names in a place where every single workbench has a camera pointed at it, recording their every move. They're meticulously deconstructing and reassembling foreign machinery, and they've all been told the same thing. This is about national survival, and secrecy is everything. For years, the story in the West has been, one of comfortable superiority. Just this April, the CEO of ASML said it would take China many, many years to replicate their technology. The consensus was, without our optics, without our engineering, they were locked out. But something has shattered that timeline. Deep inside that Shenzhen facility, a massive machine, a machine that stretches across an entire factory floor, has roared to life. It's a prototype, an extreme ultraviolet lithography system, the holy grail of chip making that can etch circuits thousands of times thinner than a human hair. By scavenging parts and using this secret network of ghost engineers, China has launched its own Manhattan Project. They're trying to systematically erase the United States from their supply chain, and they've set a target of 2028. So the question is no longer if they can build the impossible machine. The question is, how much of the world's most sensitive technology has already been rebuilt behind those closed doors?
That is just a phenomenal scene to say. I mean, the fake ID, the former colleagues. It sounds like something out of a spy novel.
Right.
It perfectly captures what this is. This isn't just another R&D project. It's a fundamental shift in global strategy.
And that narrative we've all been comfortable with, this was years away.
It's been shattered. The very existence of this operational prototype forces us to completely reevaluate. It makes you ask, how close are they really? And just how deep does this plan to get off the U.S. supply chain actually run?
Okay, so that's what we're going to do in this deep dive. We're going to unpack all of it. The tech secrets, the military-grade secrecy, the massive state resources being mobilized.
And the human cost, which is a huge part of this.
Exactly. The goal here is to understand how this happened so fast and what it means that China is, this close to self-sufficiency of the world's most critical technology. We have to look at the reality, not just the projections from a year ago.
And that reality is forcing a very rapid, and I think for some, a very uncomfortable revision of expectations. We just can't assume anymore that Western export controls are this permanent shield.
That's not a guarantee.
Not at all. We have to now operate on the fact that China is years closer to semiconductor independence than, frankly, almost anyone in the West was willing to admit. This is a story of national will meeting a truly mind-boggling technical challenge.
So let's start with the machine itself. Extreme ultraviolet lithography, EUV. You call it the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
For someone who might not be deep in the weeds on this, why is this one machine from one company, ASML, the thing that decides who leads the future?
It all comes down to precision and scale. I mean, EUV is really the only game in town for making the most advanced chips. We're talking 7 nanometer, 5 nanometer, and everything that comes after.
So lithography is basically printing circuits with light.
Exactly. And the older methods, like deep ultraviolet or DUV, they use a longer wavelength of light. Think of it like trying to paint a tiny detailed miniature with a really thick brush. You can only get so fine.
And EUV is the fine brush.
It's more than a fine brush. It's practically a microscopic one. The wavelength of EUV light is just 13.5 nanometers.
Which is tiny.
It's thousands of times thinner than a human hair. And that tiny wavelength lets you etch these incredibly complex circuits, packing billions of transistors onto a single chip. Without EUV, you just can't get the density you need for, truly powerful AI, modern smartphones, or critical defense systems. It's the barrier to entry for high-performance computing.
Which is exactly why this timeline shift is so jarring. ASML's CEO is talking years, maybe a decade. But we now know this prototype was finished in early 2025. It's operational. It's actually generating EUV light. How big of a deal is that first step, just making the light?
It's monumental. I mean, honestly, it's monumental. The light source is probably the single most complex part of the entire machine.
Why is that?
because EUV light it's just incredibly difficult to work with. It gets absorbed by almost everything, even air. So you can't use traditional glass lenses or mirrors.
So how do they do it?
The system has to generate the light by firing these incredibly powerful lasers at microscopic droplets of molten tin. And it does this 50,000 times a second.
50,000 times a second.
Yeah. And that creates this tiny, searingly hot plasma. We're talking temperatures around 200,000 degrees Celsius, hotter than the sun's surface. The fact that the Chinese prototype is doing this, that it's generating this light, means they've solved that fundamental physics and engineering problem. They can control that incredibly volatile reaction.
Okay, so if they've generated the light, which sounds like the hardest part, why can't they start printing chips tomorrow? What's the catch here?
And that is the crucial caveat. It's the one thing you have to remember. The prototype is huge, it fills a factory floor, and yes, it is generating light, but it has not produced a working chip yet.
So there's a big gap there.
A massive gap. The difference between making light in a lab and reliably printing billions of identical functional circuits on a wafer it's astronomical. It's like building a car engine that can start and run in your garage versus building a Formula One engine that can win a race.
So what are the big limitations right now? Is it about reliability? Getting every chip to be the same?
It's all of that, but the biggest things are the precision optics you need to guide that light and the sheer reliability you need for mass production. ASML's machines are workhorses. They're built to run 24/7 with almost no downtime and get a high yield.
And this prototype?
The prototype is described as crude. I mean, it's huge, many times larger than an ASML machine, which is already the size of a bus. And that size is actually a clue.
How so?
It's a direct result of them failing to replicate the compact design. They couldn't manage the heat and the vibrations in a small space, so they just had to scale everything up to make it work. That makes it slow, inefficient, and probably very unstable.
So it's a workaround, a brute force solution, because you can't solve the more elegant, miniaturized engineering problem.
That's a perfect way to put it. And now look at their targets. The government wants functional chips by 2028. That is an incredibly aggressive timeline. People on the project think 2030 is more realistic.
But even 2030, that's years ahead of what Western analysts were predicting.
Years. The gap is closing much, much faster than anyone was willing to admit, even a year ago.
Let's get into the human side of this, because you don't reverse engineer the world's most complex machine with just a blueprint. You need that.
Yeah.
That institutional memory. This is where those ghost engineers come in.
This is the absolute critical ingredient. You can call it technical obsession. The thing about EUV is that the patents and the diagrams only tell you part of the story.
Right. They don't tell you what breaks.
Exactly. They don't tell you what fails, what rattles loose after 1,000 hours, all the little tweaks you learn over decades of trial and error. That is the mental library that these former ASML veterans bring with them.
Like the story of Huawei.
A perfect example. He spent over a decade in Veldhoven, in the Netherlands, deep inside the world of ASML's high-precision optics. He didn't just know the designs.
He knew the problem.
He knew the operational challenges. When he went back to Shenzhen, he brought this internal encyclopedia of failures and fixes that took ASML decades to build. And for people like him, this is more than a job. It's described as an obsession, a drive to prove that this foreign mastery can be replicated at home.
And that kind of knowledge transfer is almost impossible to police with export controls. It's not about hacking a server. It's about hiring a person.
And it's not just one person. It's systematic. They have these teams of fresh university graduates whose only job is to disassemble and reassemble salvaged parts from older machines over and over. It's a disciplined, relentless effort to build a new domestic knowledge base from the ground up, guided by the veterans.
The prototype exists because of that talent. But that talent was put in one room because of the state. This brings us to the structure behind all of this. The modernized whole nation system. That sounds like more than just a government program.
Oh, it's way more. That's the core difference between this and, how R&D works in the West. This system is the backbone. It's a resource mobilization model, usually classified under national security, designed specifically to crush a strategic vulnerability.
So think less like a corporate project and more like
the Apollo program or a wartime mobilization. It's where money, talent, policy, everything is centrally directed at one single transformative goal. It's not about market competition or quarterly profits.
It's about eliminating a single point of failure, no matter the cost.
Precisely. And it blends the power of central planning with, very powerful market incentives. It means the top political leaders, people like Ding Xuexian, who runs the Central Science and Technology Commission, can just command that billions of dollars be reallocated, or that a state research lab must work with a private company. The EUV project isn't a business opportunity. It's a national defense priority.
And that structure is what allows for that forced marriage. It's described in our material, that blend of state intellect and corporate muscle.
That anecdote is the perfect illustration of how the system works. You have these two worlds that normally don't mix well. You have the pure academic world of state-funded research, and then you have the ruthless, efficient, get-it-done world of industry.
The theory versus the practice.
Right. You have Dr. Chen, the older researcher from a national institute. He holds the theoretical blueprints, the physics. He's the state intellect. And then he's paired with Zhang, a young, driven engineer from a huge tech company. He's the corporate muscle. He can get parts, manage supply chains, run a team efficiently.
And when those two worlds finally clicked,
the breakthrough moment was described as a cold clinical victory. When they finally got the vacuum chamber working and saw that first stable EUV beam, there were no cheers, no celebration. They just nodded at each other and immediately started logging the next 10,000 variables they needed to test.
Wow.
It just shows how the system works. It bypasses the slow process of academic research, then publication, then maybe industry adoption years later. It forces them together to get a result now.
And speaking of corporate muscle, we have to talk about Huawei. They're at the very center of this. How does one company manage a national Manhattan project like this?
Their role is so much bigger than just being a supplier or a partner. They are the central coordinator, the project integrator. Think of them as the general contractor on a massive top-secret construction project.
So they're managing all the different players.
Hundreds of them, state research institutes, small component makers, different corporate teams all over the country. And the CEO, Ren Zhengfei, is briefing senior government leaders directly on their progress. That tells you how high up the chain this goes.
And for Huawei, this has to be existential, especially after they were put on the U.S. entity list back in 2019.
Absolutely. That was the moment that provided the ultimate motivation. Being put on that list cut them off from critical U.S. tech, and their survival became directly tied to this project. They have an explicit corporate mandate to achieve 100% independence from the U.S. supply chain.
They want the U.S. kicked out, as the saying goes.
100% kicked out. That's the goal. Their corporate survival and national self-sufficiency are now the exact same thing.
That explains the drive. But a project this big needs an incredible amount of money. Let's look at the financial architecture behind this.
It's a huge multi-layered financial framework. The main vehicle is what's called the Big Fund. It's formerly the China Integrated Circuit Industry Investment Fund. It was launched way back in 2014, and it's already poured tens of billions of dollars into strengthening the domestic industry.
And what's the goal of all that spending? What's the target?
The goal is astonishing. They want to be 50% self-sufficient in semiconductor equipment by 2025.
50%? From what?
From an estimated 13.6% just last year, it would be a gigantic leap. The Big Fund is basically a massive engine de-risking these projects, making sure the capital is there for moonshots like EUV.
And this fits into that bigger economic strategy, the dual circulation strategy. How does that policy support a project like this?
The dual circulation strategy is the country's theoretical defense shield against things like export controls. The whole point is to prioritize internal circulation. So, domestic innovation, domestic R&D, domestic demand, while still engaging with the world.
So it's about building resilience.
It's about making sure that if the global tap gets turned off, the internal engine keeps running. It's a national pivot away from reliance and toward resilience.
And on top of all that, there are just massive government subsidies.
The spending is accelerating every year. Just look at the numbers for 2025. Government subsidies are expected to cover about 400 billion yuan of the total AI capital expenditure. That's out of a total of maybe 84 to 98 billion dollars. The state is shouldering most of the financial risk to move faster than the market ever would.
So if the money is the fuel, the talent is the engine. Which brings us back to those ghost engineers in Shenzhen. This is a massive, organized reverse brain drain.
It's a deliberate global campaign. We hear about things like the 1,000 Talents Plan, but it's much broader than that. It's about acquiring very specific, high-level expertise, especially from overseas Chinese experts who have the exact skills they need.
Let's talk about the incentives. What does it take to get a top engineer to leave a comfortable life in Europe or the US and move to a high-security lab in China?
The packages are staggering. I mean, they are globally competitive. Recruitment drives, especially around 2019, were offering signing bonuses starting at $500,000, going up to $700,000.
Wow.
And that's on top of things like home purchase subsidies. Plus, they're promised almost unlimited research funding and leadership roles they might have to wait years for at a place like ASML or Intel.
And who are the prime targets? Who are they going after the hardest?
The highest value targets are recently retired, Chinese-born former ASML engineers. These are the people who have the most current knowledge, they know the newest processes, but they have fewer contractual strings attached after they leave the company. Their knowledge is invaluable.
And they were even approaching current ASML employees in the Netherlands.
That must have set off alarm bells.
It absolutely did. The talent war wasn't just for retirees, it was for anyone with inside knowledge of how ASML works. The strategy is pretty simple, really. If you can't buy the machine, buy the people who built the machine, and then pay them a lot more to build it again for you.
Which brings us back to the secrecy, the fake IDs. Why go to such extreme lengths? Is it just to protect the engineers, or is there a bigger reason?
It's both. Of course, it protects the individuals from legal trouble, but more importantly, it protects the project.
How so?
The recruits get these IDs with pseudonyms. That veteran engineer was reportedly stunned when his huge bonus came with a fake name he was told to use at all times.
So it's made clear from day one, this is a national security operation.
Classified, absolutely. And the pseudonyms create operational silos. If one part of the project gets compromised, it's much harder for foreign intelligence to map out the entire network of who is actually working on the machine. No one knows everyone's true identity. And that security extends to the working conditions. Sleeping on site, no phones. It sounds like a military base.
It's that Manhattan Project level of commitment. Huawei imposes these incredibly strict controls. Employees on sensitive teams often sleep on site for weeks at a time. They can't go home. Their phone and internet access is restricted. It's not just about getting work done, it's about stopping leaks.
And the detail about every workbench being filmed by its own camera. That's an intense level of surveillance.
It is intense, but it serves a real engineering purpose. You have that reverse engineering assembly line, about 100 recent grads, whose whole job is taking apart and reassembling salvaged components. The camera on each desk documents the entire process.
So every success and every failure is recorded?
Exactly. It's logged, analyzed, and turned into a reusable domestic knowledge base. And they even offer bonuses for successful reassembly, so it becomes this highly incentivized, controlled learning process.
So the goal is to create a new internal instruction manual that can't be traced back to any single stolen document or foreign expert.
Precisely. They are domesticating the knowledge, turning the expertise that was in the heads of those ghost engineers into a codified process that the next generation of Chinese engineers can use.
This all naturally leads to the issue of IP protection. How can a company like ASML even defend itself against this kind of systematic, state-backed recruitment?
It's incredibly difficult. For one, ASML is limited by European privacy laws, and trying to enforce an NDA across international borders against a state-backed entity is a nightmare.
We've seen examples of this fail, right?
We have. ASML won a huge judgment, something like $845 million, against a former engineer for stealing trade secrets. But the engineer just declared bankruptcy in the US and is still operating his business in Beijing, reportedly with full government support. The judgment is effectively meaningless there.
So a legal win in the West doesn't actually protect the technology on the ground.
Not really. Once that knowledge is in an engineer's head, it's mobile. And the Dutch intelligence services have been warning about this for years. They say China uses extensive espionage programs to target high-tech employees and scientists. They know the human talent is the real prize.
Okay, so we know the prototype is working, it's making light, but it's crude and it's massive. Let's pivot to the biggest technical roadblocks they still need to solve to hit that 2030 target.
Well, the size of the machine itself is the biggest clue. It's huge because that was their workaround for all the heat and vibration issues. But the number one, the primary enduring challenge, is what you could call the optics hurdle.
The mirrors, the parts that actually have to collect and focus that incredibly powerful EUV light.
Yes, and these aren't just mirrors from your bathroom. They are some of the most precise objects humanity has ever made. The light has to be bounced off a series of perfectly curved mirrors inside a total vacuum. And those mirrors traditionally come from one place, Germany's Carl Zeiss AG, ASML's key partner.
Just how precise are we talking about here? What makes them so hard to make?
The precision is just... It's hard to even comprehend. If you scaled one of these mirrors up to be the size of Germany, the biggest bump or dip on its surface could be no more than 1/10 of a millimeter high.
That's insane.
They are polished to almost atomic perfection, and it can take months to make just one. Replicating that is the defining bottleneck right now.
And who in China is tasked with solving this impossible optics problem?
That would be the Changchun Institute of Optics, Fine Mechanics, and Physics, or CIOMP. They're the ones leading the charge. They're credited with the breakthrough that allowed the light source to be integrated, which is what made the prototype operational in the first place.
So they made progress.
They've solved the basic integration, but refining it for mass production is a whole different ballgame. And just like with the engineers, they are being incredibly aggressive with talent.
I saw they're offering uncapped salaries.
Uncapped salaries for top lithography PhDs, plus massive research grants and personal subsidies. It shows you they know exactly where their weakness is, and they're throwing every resource they have at solving the optics problem.
Okay, the elephant in the room. How did they even build this thing in the first place with all the U.S. export controls designed to stop exactly this from happening? Where are they getting the parts?
They're exploiting every gap in the global supply chain. It's a very sophisticated approach. First, they're salvaging. They're taking apart older ASML machines that were sold before the strictest controls were put in place.
So the secondhand market must be on fire right now.
It's extremely busy. They're sourcing parts from other suppliers too, like Nikon and Canon, through these secondary markets, and they often use webs of intermediary companies to hide who the final buyer actually is.
They're also using more legitimate channels, right?
Right. Banks and asset platforms are always auctioning off equipment from failed fabs. We've seen reports of older but still very useful ASML equipment being sold on platforms like Alibaba Auction as recently as late 2025. So there's this continuous stream of components they can use for reverse engineering.
So the export controls slowed them down, but it feels like it also just forced them to become incredibly creative and self-reliant.
It delayed them, yes, but it also gave them an existential reason to build their own system from the ground up. If a part has ever been sold anywhere in the world, a determined, state-backed buyer will eventually find a way to get it.
Let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture, at the philosophy of innovation here. You can see a really stark contrast in the patent data between the U.S. and China.
The patent data is fascinating. It gives you this objective window into two completely different strategies. When you look at U.S. firms like Synopsys or Cadence, you see a culture of open innovation.
What does that mean in practice?
It means their patents are constantly citing research and prior inventions from all over the world. A really high number, actually 18.6% of the patents they cite come from China. They're building on global progress.
So they're part of a global conversation.
Exactly. Now, you contrast that with the Chinese strategy. You look at the companies and institutes in this self-reliance push, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, NAUR Technology Group, and it's the total opposite. Over 97% of the prior art they cite is domestic, and they file their own patents almost exclusively within China.
The implication there is huge. The West is still operating this open global ecosystem, while China is intentionally building a closed, walled garden.
It's a strategic decoupling of intellectual property. They are systematically ensuring their future tech is not dependent on foreign licenses, collaboration, or knowledge. They are building a resilient internal ecosystem that's immune to future export controls.
Okay, finally, let's talk about the economic pain point that makes this entire crazy project necessary. Why spend all this money if their main chip maker, SMIC, can already reportedly make 5-nanometer chips?
That is the critical economic driver. It's the cost of waiting for EUV. Yes, SMIC is making incredible progress. They're on track for 5-millimeter development using their older deep ultraviolet or DUV machines.
But there's a catch.
There's a huge catch. To get that level of detail with DUV, you have to run the wafers through the machine multiple times. It's a tedious, complex, and incredibly expensive process to achieve what EUV can do in a single pass.
And what does that do to the price and quality?
It makes them non-competitive. The production cost for one of SMIC's 5-millimeter wafers made with DUV is up to 50% higher than what TSMC can do with EUV.
50%.
And maybe even worse, their yield, the number of usable chips they get off each wafer, is only about a third of TSMC's. It's just not an economically sustainable way to do mass production.
So they can technically make the advanced chips, but at a huge loss.
Yeah.
The EUV project isn't just about pride. It's about economic survival in the chip market.
That's it, exactly. The economic imperative is what's driving the political will. They have to master EUV to get their costs down, to get their yields up, and to actually compete. Otherwise, all their amazing progress in chip design, the Huawei Ascend chips, Baidu's AI chips, will always be held back by manufacturing that's just too expensive and inefficient to scale. So if we just try to pull all of this together, what really stands out is this strategic convergence. You have the immense financial resources from the big fund. You have this high security, highly controlled infrastructure run by a giant like Huawei, and you have the systematic, targeted poaching of the world's best talent.
And it's all pointed at one single goal.
One single transformative technological goal. Domestic mastery of EUV. This isn't just about closing a technology gap anymore. It's a national project of resilience.
It's like a marathon that's been compressed into a sprint. And you have to wonder about the human toll on the people inside that project. It requires this incredible patience, defining your whole career by these tiny incremental gains toward a goal that's still years away.
And that's where you see the long-term persistence that's outlined in their 2030 roadmap. Just picture a young technician in that Shenzhen lab. Her whole career is now mapped against that 2030 goal of mass production.
She knows the light she's seeing today won't be a profitable chip for years.
Right. Her daily job is making these tiny nanometer scale gains, improving a mirror's reflectivity by a fraction of a percent, reducing a system vibration by a single nanometer. Her personal dedication is completely tied to a national timeline.
That image, a generation of engineers tying their identity to a national timeline, it really underscores the discipline here. It's an act of collective will that just operates outside of normal market forces.
And that's why the real story here, the underlying story of this whole semiconductor race, isn't really about the crude machine they have working today. It's about the decade-long strategic persistence of a nation that has tied its collective identity to a timeline. They are transforming a technology gap into a permanent internal technological engine. And that shift from reliance to resilience is already changing the calculus of global power, whether those advanced chips are rolling off the line today or 5 years from now.